Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Today, the dominant ideology in the world is secular modernism, which emerged in Europe. Any movement for Islamic revival which seeks to replace this with a new framework, a new paradigm, a new set of ideas, must understand what this dominant ideology is and what are its weaknesses and strengths. And one of the key references in terms of understanding how secular modernity came about is this book by Tony. We will go through it chapter by chapter in this sequence of lectures. So this book is about how Christianity shaped and was also shaped by the emergence of capitalism. This is one of the important aspects of the European transition to secular modernity. Religion is always, well, we can define religion as a way of life and according to Islamic ideas, and this is the set of the ideological framework which governs the society in all dimensions, in political, economic, and social dimensions. I have argued in a paper of mine that the modern social sciences are actually a replacement for Christianity, and therefore they are a religion. This Western social science is the religion of Europe, and how it came to be this way, one aspect of the story is told by Tony. The book starts with a quote from a bishop that if you don't contemplate the great things, what is life all about and what is the ultimate goal, then you are no better than an earthworm. And this is in correspondence with Islamic thoughts that the innamal amal bin niyat, and man can have only whatever he strives for, and so the value of our life depends on how big our goals are. The book describes what it plans to do, and basically it goes from 16th century, where the biblical understanding is that the love of money is the root of all evil, to the 18th century, where the exact opposite, lack of money is the root of all evil, is the saying of Bernard Shaw. So how did this revolution occur? The book will trace this in the political, economic, and social dimensions. The chapter just traces the religious background. Basically, religion defines the goal of life for individuals and society. The political theory is governed by the fact that the idea that the king is the shadow of God, so he makes the laws as he sees fit. Economic theory is governed by concepts of the community as one body, which has social responsibility. People have duties to each other. And social theory is that religion defines our conduct towards each other. In the transition from a Christian society to a secular modern society, the collective goals of society change. So the book is going to trace what the collective goals of society were and what they became. Chapter 1 is about what the society was like before the emergence of capitalism. So traditional social thought defines the society as a body which has different parts with different functions, different ranks, but they all work harmoniously together for a common good. This is in correspondence with Islamic ideas. Two of the key pillars of economic thought in the 16th and 17th century are very closely parallel to Islamic thought, that economic interests are subordinate to the real business of life. The real business of life is about how we achieve success in the hereafter. And economic affairs are one part, a subordinate part of our human conduct. Nonetheless, it's not that we are completely ascetic, but material comforts and material wealth is necessary, but it's only necessary as an instrument to our other goals. So pretty much as in Islamic thought, wealth is a means to an end, not the end by itself. Property in Christian society, pre-capitalistic, is that the communism is the ideal form. Everyone should have all the property to themselves, but it's a human weakness that we can't share. So it is allowable, it's permissible to have property, but private property is subject to the rights of others. You must acquire it in what in Islam would say halal forms, and you might the benefits should be shared with the largest possible numbers. And there are lots of social duties associated with the having of property. Methods of earning money are labor, which is the most honorable, and then trade, which is basically buying something and selling it higher. That's necessary, but it's not it's not considered as a very good thing. Now, this is a very key difference from Islam. In Islam, trade is perfectly honorable and recommended and desirable. Finance, on the other hand, is treated as the worst possible thing, and people have to give loans and money for the needs of business, but this is a very, very dangerous and very harmful to spiritual. Basically, a key difference between Islamic teachings and Christian teachings is that Christianity frowns upon the idea that you buy something and you sell it at a higher price for a profit. So this idea that the middleman is an evil person is in fact one of the key problems that Christianity had with the emergence of prosperity in Europe. So how should we deal with the profits of trade? Because that's not considered legitimate to take a good and sell it, the same good, at a higher price. So the original thinking was that it should be just the wage of the person. It should be treated in parallel with labor. And so basically the labor theory of value is a descendant of this line of thinking, and the book makes the statement that Karl Marx was actually the last of the schoolmen, which is the Catholic or Protestant ideology about economics. Again, in economic realm, we should be satisfied with what we need and should not strive for more. Note that Weber says that capitalism is the pursuit of wealth for its own sake. So this is a key difference between the pre-capitalist ideology and the capitalist. There's a huge amount of passion against the practice of interest, giving money and then collecting interest on its return. And there's just large amount of both theory and ideology and actually emotions attached to this, because this was a practical matter that people were given loans and then the financiers would take great advantage of them in all possible ways. So these ideologies about labor, trade, and finance are not just church teachings, but actually they are very strongly supported by the public, and the book cites a lot of different cases which show the public is very strongly in support of these ideas. So having described the ideological framework for the pre-capitalist society, we look at the reality of the picture. So under these conditions, under these ideologies, social change is actually impossible, and movements for making any change were strongly condemned, and especially those people who wanted to change would combine their call for change with the criticism of the upper echelons of the church, which were living in high luxury. And so this made the church even more resistant to any kind of change. So in this kind of environment, change, according to the dominant ideology, was impossible. No evolutionary path was possible. Only reform came through radical change, basically rejecting the Christian ideological framework and replacing it with an alternative. So what was the reason for this? The church actually was a revolutionary when the Christians were in a minority and they were seeking to overturn the social order. But when they actually won out and the kings and rulers were Christians and the Catholic Church was actually one of the major power players of politics, then they had a strong vested interest in the social order, and then they could not be revolutionaries. So the church ideology was unable to cope with the rising tide of commerce and surplus production which was created by industrialization. They did not have an ideological framework to handle the trade and the finance that was required by the development of industry and finance. Even though the conditions of the serfs were extremely bad, the church did not provide any defense for them. In fact, it supported the practice, and it was one of the biggest landlords. The drivers of change did not originate from within the church, but from the French Revolution and other ideologies emerging from outside the church. So basically, it was the success of the church that made it supporter of the social status and prevented it from being able to respond to the rising tide of change. So the last paragraph of Tawney appraises the efforts of the church and says that yes, they were impotent and ineffective, but they did have an ideological framework which it would have been possible to use to help the poor and to create social change. And in some ways, they actually did some of the things that were required. So the glass is half empty and half full. And he asked for a sympathetic judgment of the church instead of thinking of it as a pure evil.